Our next guest, and this is somebody who many of you already may know, and Brad's been around. One of the things that let me tell you something about Brad. Brad is kind of I'll call him an outdoorsman. I'll let him talk about that in a minute, but he's also been very connected with the whole Wild of Heart world with John Eldridge and them. And a few years ago, I'm kind of curious, how many of you went through we went through about an 8-week series where he led us through the advance. Wasn't that a great 8 weeks? And so many of you know Brad already. And so Brad, why don't you come up here? Let's give Brad a hand. Welcome him up here. Brad Lindemann. There you go. A long time. That's great. Actually, I was going to interview both him and Brian up here at the same time, but I thought I was going to feel short, so I thought I would break it up. It's great to have you here. Brad, tell us a little bit about your family. How long have you been at Grace and that sort of thing? Where did you grow up? I don't know any of that stuff.
Born and raised in southern Indiana, okay. New Albany, right across the river from Louisville, for those of you who are familiar with the territory. Mm-hmm. My father was actually born in New Albany as well. My mother was from Ohio, and IU folks, both mom and dad, IU grads, proud of that fact. I think Brian's a Purdue guy, as I recall. So we're balancing the scale here tonight. There's somebody noticed my red socks. I can't believe that. That's what outdoorsmen do. They wear red socks.
Yeah.
Anyway, where were we?
We're going to have fun with that, yeah. Yeah, so
I've got a big
kids?
family. Got a
Yeah.
big family. 5 kids. They're all married. 7 grandkids. We're just getting warmed up. So
really?
We got 6 granddaughters, 1 grandson. 3 boys, 2 girls on the kids' side, ages 37 to 25.
Goodness. Well, so how long have you been at Grace Church?
About 15 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When did you give your life to Jesus? As a child or?
As a college student, April 13th, 1975, prayed the prayer on page 10, room 18 at the Phi Kappa Psi House at 1200 North Jordan in Bloomington, Indiana. How do I know? Just because I was there. I was just there. It had happened, and lightning did not strike, and thunder didn't roll, but on that day, my life changed almost 40 years ago.
Hallelujah. That was great.
And the cool thing about that, guys, is that I didn't know that date until a few years later, and I was blessed. The guy that led me to Christ was a fanatical, is it Franklin planner? Is that the? Mm-hmm. And so I knew he kept meticulous records, and he was able to look back and tell me. So if you don't know that date, please, that shouldn't make you feel bad at all. It just kind of tickles me that I'm able to know that.
Wow. Where and when? That was great.
In a fraternity house of all things.
Fraternity house, I know. Miracles do happen.
Wow. They do.
Well, so Brian, you are a...
I'm Brad, by the way.
Brad.
Just fun. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I said I was going to do this. I thought about that all day long.
That's okay, Mark. Just keep it going, buddy.
By the way, I think I still have a card from my in-laws. They said, Merry Christmas, Mark. So we're off here. So talk to me. You've got a business. You're CEO in a business. Talk to us about Ambassador.
Well, as a business by the Lord's leading, I was able to found in 1989, April Fool's Day. Didn't do it on my own. Started it as a division of another company. As you mentioned, the cornerstone of the business has been the namesake out of 2 Corinthians 5:20. We're ambassadors for Christ. Mm-hmm. God making his appeal through us. That's the plan A that Dave Rod talks about all the time. If that doesn't scare you, nothing will. Because that's it. That's the plan. It's us. Wow.
So you understood right from the get-go this deal that there's not secular work and spiritual work. You, from the get-go, you embrace this notion that what you did for a living was part of God's, an essential part of God's call in your life.
I did embrace the notion. I can't say that I executed it
Right.
very well at many points along the way. And I can tell you one thing that happened. Over the years, many people would use the term, Christian company, and I was always quick to point out there is no such thing. Let me be clear. Companies can't be Christians, only people. But the risk, I think Brian made a comment about wearing your faith on your sleeve and that type of thing, and I kind of do that. And that is more a function, guys, of personality than it is anything. It's that just it comes naturally for me. It's a real faith, but it's just easy by temperament for me to kind of wear it on my sleeve. Here's the risk in that, and I didn't realize this until in recent years. In doing so, and with relative ease, working a spiritual theme into a conversation with a perfect stranger, there's good in that. So don't take this wrong, but if that's where it stops, you haven't executed on plan A. You don't have them at hello. You have them at hello, Jesus. And that's what we're here for. And what I realized is I kind of felt like, well, I'm just sort of spreading little Jesus pixie dust everywhere I go, and that's good. But the Lord has convicted me and said, well, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you stop there, that's not enough. Because we're about growing the kingdom. We're about introducing people to Jesus. Not just the Cliff Notes, the full meal deal. And so I'm still, very much growing into that part of the deal.
That's a very strong point.
Very convicting one, too, I might add.
So also, you've got your business, but also you are quite involved with another area of ministry. And want to talk about that for a minute?
I do.
And I'm kind of curious how you...
about life centers?
Yes.
Life centers.
And what drew you to that? Tell us about what it is.
Do I have an hour? No.
No, sorry.
The issue of sanctity of life has hit my life early, starting in college, thinking my girlfriend was pregnant, and the joke was on me because she wasn't, but God put me through all the paces of what I would do if I were in control, and I wasn't. But He made me go through Psalm 139 and realize that His Spirit is present in the womb, in the life of that unborn child, and convicted me back in the mid-'70s. I'll never forget the day I wrote in the margin of my Bible, Psalm 139, no abortion, all caps, square. Boom. And 6, what is commonly referred to, I don't like the phrase, but you know what I mean when I say crisis pregnancy, 6 crisis pregnancy events later in the life of my extended family. If I look over the past 40 years, there's 2 coals that have burned hotter every day, Brad. And the first is Plan A, and the second is the sanctity of life and what God would have me to do He gave me what I believe was a calling that I'm still trying to figure out, guys. This is 12, 13 years ago. Abolish abortion in America in my lifetime. I'm just silly enough to believe, I'm 58, by God's grace and relatively good health. I believe I won't leave this planet until that happens. That's not to suggest that consider myself the Martin Luther King of this issue, But it does suggest that God has impressed upon my heart that this, I believe, is the defining issue of this generation. I believe that as we go on this issue, so goes our nation. I believe that literally the future of our nation depends on what we do with the issue of life. And I'm still trying to figure out what that means for Brad Lindemann on a day-to-day basis. But as a practical point, I'm vice chairman of the board of Life Centers, which is the largest pregnancy resource center in the area. We've got, I can never remember if it's 8 or 9 centers here around the donut of Marion County.
I was president of the board of a crisis pregnancy center in Battle Creek, Michigan for a number of years, and I was never really comfortable with that term, crisis pregnancy, because the pregnancy, I mean, take out the misbehavior and all the irresponsibility. The pregnancy itself is an amazing, miraculous, wonderful thing. And it's what other people do and how it comes about. That child needs to be celebrated and is a gift from God. I like that a lot. Well, let's, and God bless you for your work there. And by the way, the Life Centers are one of the partner ministries here at Grace Church, if you're curious about looking into that.
And for those of you who support us, we appreciate that.
So let's go back to your role as a company founder and owner. And what is that, when I moved here, tell us about what your work is. What does Ambassador Solutions do?
We're an IT consulting company, and in that regard, we primarily do software development, mostly on a contract basis, more occasionally now on an outsourced project basis. So essentially, we rent programmers to folks that need them to build software for them. Our biggest client here in town is the former ExactTarget, now Salesforce Marketing Cloud, they call themselves. We probably got some of their employees here who works for them. Not a single one in this room. I'm shocked. Anyway.
That has been a kind of a volatile industry, the whole software industry and tech industry. And what's that like, maneuvering through that as a Christ follower and having guys and men and women working for you and counting on you? What's it like?
It's volatile. It seems like we've had more than our fair share of volatility since the Great Recession. Was anybody else's business impacted negatively in the Great Recession, or was it just ours? I see a few hands. Nobody lost their job back then. I mean, nothing bad happened, but wow. No, it's since since October of 2008, we've been in a battle. We've been in the furnace. And occasionally we look around and we see the angel with us, and occasionally we look around and wonder where the angel went. It's been difficult. Our business is 25-30% of what it was 6 years ago. And we just have found bottom. And wow, some of the most difficult times I've ever been through in the last 6 years. It's been very humbling.
Yeah. Here's one of the things that has always bothered me, that whenever Christian businessmen are telling their story, generally it's always the stories that are always going up and to the right and everything's roses. And sometimes it's not. And sometimes following Jesus, it's not a guarantee that things are going to go great. And you're not starving, you're not, and you admit that. And there's food on the table and you have a pretty good life, but it has not always gone up and to the right. And so you've had to lead your people through that. How has that played out?
Yeah. Well, I think about humility a lot. It dawned on me recently that the road to humility is paved with humiliation. Has anybody been there? You walked that road? Don, I see you laughing over there. So, yeah. That's biblical. And that helps to know that. It's a great quality. It doesn't come naturally. And for me, it's come with, a great price. I'll tell you the other thing about wearing it on your sleeve and spreading that pixie dust around is you are a walking billboard for Jesus, for better or for worse. And so you have to be prepared when you do something like what Brian shared with us. You've got to be prepared to deal with that, because it's really not about you. It really isn't. You've told the world you're an ambassador for Christ in 1,000 different ways. And when you fail to act befitting that calling, and it's time to fess up, you better be ready to do that. And those opportunities come more often than I care to admit. I had one recently that I realized, I clearly had offended a gal that was a potential candidate for us. And of course, she was wrong and I was right, but, beside the point. I offended her. And this is an interesting thing. The details of this don't matter. I was the business owner. I was the guy that should have been on the high road the whole time, and I really hadn't been. And I had to eventually fess up to that. But here's the interesting thing that happened, guys. And this was the most hurtful to me when I realized what I had done. I could tell from her LinkedIn profile that she was a Christian. Just too many signs to, and I knew this was going to be a volatile issue, so I suggested that we talk, and she didn't really want to do that. So we got into a little email battle. You ever been there? And they just keep getting worse, and so I started to get really convicted. And I offered to her, I said, I think we should just kind of call a timeout. Let's sleep on this. And let's try to take this up again tomorrow in a more Christ-honoring kind of fashion. Now, what do you think happened? What do you think happened? You think she put down her sword and picked up her olive branch and said, "Oh, gosh, I'm so relieved to know what a wonderful, God-honoring Christian guy you are"? No. She was just more offended. Don't you dare bring Christ into this situation after you were so rude and condescending to me. Now, guys, I got to tell you, she's stretching the definition of rude and condescending. She really was. But did it matter at that point? Do you see what happened there? And so ultimately, I had to take myself down 3 notches and admit to her that, the ultimate fault is mine. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And she did. And I share that, not this, oh, wow, isn't that wonderful? He did the right thing. That's not the point. The point is how bad I screwed it up, right? We're ambassadors for Christ. God making his appeal through us. We're plan A. I screwed that up. I felt horrible about it. And the worse I felt, it seemed like the worse it got. So anyway, where were we?
Yeah, what was that? The road to humility is humiliation.
Is paved with humiliation.
Yeah. The Bible says over and over again, in so many different ways, that if we'll humble ourselves before the Lord, he will exalt us. And I've just found over and over again, if I drag my feet, if the time has come for me to humble myself, he will do it.
Yes.
He will bring me to my knees. So. By the way, some of you don't know this, but Brad was part of a very important group of guys, about 13, 14 guys, back in 2008 that went to a conference called No Man Left Behind, and they came back from that conference. So a number of guys in this room were there, and they came back from that conference saying they wanted to adopt the No Man Left Behind model that Men of Grace now uses. And one of the decisions that came out of that also was for Grace was to hire a full-time guy. So,
Yeah.
you know, that was, I benefited from that. So Brad has been involved with the Men of Grace for some time. So Brad, I want to ask you this. I mean, as you look out at these guys, what would be one thing, as we're talking about bringing a life-giving presence into the workplace, what would be one thing, maybe you feel like you've touched on it already, one thing that you would want to leave them with, perhaps to think about?
Well, before I'm done, I do have a story, but just so you know.
Sure.
One of my mentors years ago, as we were sitting at a lunch table, and I had 5 children, he had 6, and we were deep into the weeds with a number of trials and tribulations of parenting. I know nobody else has been there. Kurt's family, I get so sick of hearing his stories. You know, they're all perfect. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, look at this guy. He looks like talk about an outdoors, you know, he looks like he just jumped off of, you know, Vail Mountain in a parachute, you know. But, you know, he said, the practical point, he said, well, you know what, Brad, you know, you got 5 kids. Let me tell you something. You're always going to be a parent.
Right.
You're going to die a parent. Get used to it. And guess what? The problems get bigger. They don't get smaller.
Yeah.
But here was the sage wisdom that I never forgot. I've failed to follow it many times, but I've never forgotten it. Whatever happens, stay sweet, hold steady. Stay sweet, hold steady. You know, I am a pretty emotional male animal. That's just the way I'm wired. You know, so my Achilles heel is those emotions. That they can give me great passion, you know, they can help me, you know, persuade people. There's a lot of good things about it, but there's also, you know, one of the things that somebody taught me years ago is that most weaknesses, most of what we see in ourselves and others as weaknesses are really just strengths taken to an extreme. This goes right into the stay sweet and hold steady thing. Some of you guys have heard the Cliff Notes version of this. This is the Cliff Notes version. Those of you that know me know that the 2 big rocks in my bag in recent years have been my business that we've talked about briefly and my wife's health. Been very heavy burdens for a very long time. And like many of you, I have pleaded before God on behalf of both thousands of times. Every one of you has been there. Every one of you has your own rocks, right? You know what I'm talking about. So it's interesting that you reference Wild at Heart and John Eldridge. So a couple of Sundays ago, I'm walking the beach down in Florida. It's a pretty nice, it's early morning, Sunday morning. I'm listening to worship music, and I'm walking down the beach. It's not going to take long, Mike. It's okay.
Yeah.
And as I learned to do a few years ago, Brother Warren, where are you? I was doing as I got to the turn, there wasn't anybody on this beach, guys, nobody. I couldn't see a soul. And so I'm looking around, I'm getting into the worship music, I'm worshiping the Lord, I'm praying, and I start to do a little bit of my worship dancing thing. I can't do it nearly as well as Warren can, but I'm kind of cutting a groove there on the water's edge. But it's kind of lame, quite honestly.
I'm sure.
It was nothing compared to, I mean, it wasn't anything like what David did when he stripped down in his underwear and really got down and worshiped and danced. And I've done a much better job early mornings in our backyard. But anyway, so I'm walking back, as God is my witness, I'm walking back. And I mean, I'm in a great frame of mind. I mean, it's been worshipful. And out of nowhere, other than from the Holy Spirit, here's the thought. Hadn't been on this blog in a year plus. Hadn't read any of Eldridge's books in several years. You need to go to Craig's last blog post on the Ransom Heart website. Out of nowhere. So I sit down on the beach and I open up Craig McConnell. He's on the staff at Ransom Heart. He has cancer, by the way. Mm-hmm. So I encourage you to go to that last blog. I hope it's not his last blog. But the picture on that blog, when you look it up, is of a little girl dancing on the beach. Hmm. The last line in that blog is, "Don't let anything keep you from dancing." Did you get what I had been doing 3 minutes before that thought entered my mind? Jim, that blew every circuit I had, and some I didn't even know I had. And I'm thinking, what? Really? Did that just happen? You're not talking to you won't hear that kind of thing out of me very often. I'm not a guy that gets up, and by 7 o'clock, God's given me, 3 ooh-ahs for the day, and I'm off. Like, what is up? And I just connected the dots. So I'm just blown away, and I'm literally in a daze, and I'm walking along, and here comes another one. And until yesterday, I'm thinking this is the lesser one, because here's what the next incoming said. He said, Jim, actually called me Brad, as opposed to Brian. He knows my name. He said, no verbal voice, just a clear thought. That business plan or lack of that you keep wearing me out about? Let me tell you something. I'll be a lot more interested in blessing your business when you become more interested in your business plan, when you become more interested in executing my plan. Plan A. The connection and I'm thinking it's all about the dance story. Look up the blog post. It'll blow your mind. That God specifically said, go to Craig's last blog post and don't ever let anything keep you from dancing. I thought that was the big idea. You know what that was? That was the undeniable attention getter. Do I have your attention? Now I'm going to tell you what is the most important thing you need to know right now, because you came down here to this beach for 2 primary purposes. You wanted something to break free in your business and in your wife's health. And here is plan A for your business. I hope you're listening, and I hope you recognize who's talking, because he just proved it with what he showed you in this blog and what you were just feeling a little silly about doing just a few minutes ago. Wow. Guys, I'm so not special, I can't even tell you how not special I am. The only thing special about me is what I hope is special about most of you. And that is, at some point in your life, you made a no turning back commitment to Jesus Christ, and you're all in. And you recognize, whether it's on your business card or not is not the point, but you recognize that your number one job in this world is to play the role of that ambassador. You are plan A. God is beseeching others through you to himself. And I hope that you become as obsessed, and I'm speaking to myself, and it breaks my heart how confused that I've been for 40 years of walking with Jesus, and how obsessed I have been with things that in the end don't really matter. And it's been there all along. It's so simple. And yet it's so hard, I know, to do sometimes. But listen, if you're trying to do it on your own power, I mean, it's impossible to do. Don't even waste your time. As Brian said, you have to have the power of the Holy Spirit. Otherwise, you're just making noise. And probably irritating a lot of people in the process, and potentially maybe turning them away, never to turn back. So please don't do this on your own strength.
I like that line, God's saying to you, and you'd pass on to these guys, before he gets real interested in our business plan or our ministry plan, we need to be interested in his plan. Yeah. Hey guys, Brad came back to talk to us, so it's good to have him out tonight. Let's give him a hand and thank him. All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Brad. Appreciate it. Yeah. Good to have you.